Snack Attack.
Say no more.
It's Mr. Creighton.
And Mrs. Klein.
And we're here with your next podcast. It is Chapter 12, Lesson 1, The Aztecs. In the last podcast, you guys heard about early civilizations in Mesoamerica. In this podcast, you will read about the rise and fall of the greatest empire in that region, the Aztec Empire. There are only a few terms and names this time, and these will be on your podcast quiz coming up in a few days. The first one is Tenochtitlan, Montezuma II, and Hernan Cortez. Remember, when you hear this sound, it means you just heard a vocab word.
Okay, and as a reminder, we've got a big idea for this unit. The big idea this time around is civilizations across time and space share similar characteristics. The first essential question for you to consider also is, are we all more the same or different across continents?
The next essential question, how do people adapt to their environment and advanced civilization?
Next question, what are the characteristics of civilizations?
How does geography influence the history of civilizations?
And how do the roles and responsibilities of nobles and commoners differ in ancient societies? All right, our first section, you guys, you're going to find on pages 397 to 398 in your book. It's called Aztecs Settle in Central Mexico. Be thinking of this question as you're following along. How did the Aztecs adapt to the Valley of Mexico? The Aztecs settled in the Valley of Mexico in the late 1200s. No major power controlled the region when they arrived. The area had some small city-states ruled by various peoples. These groups held the most fertile land, and the Aztecs had to claim the rest. It was less than ideal.
A legend says that the Aztec sun and war god told the Aztecs they should settle where they saw an eagle sitting on a cactus. In 1325, they found such a place near a large lake. There, they built the city of Tenochtitlan. This city became their capital.
The lands around Tenochtitlan were not well suited to farming. The land was swampy, high mountains surrounded it. There was little flat land for farming and no wood or stone nearby for building. But the Aztecs adapted by building chinampas, or floating gardens on the lake. They grew corn, squash, and other crops on the chinampas. With enough food, the population of Tenochtitlan increased and spread out around the lake. Trade was important to the Aztec economy. The Aztecs traded for goods that they could not get locally.
Over time, the Aztec Empire grew very large. It expanded by making alliances with some city-states and by conquering others. The Aztecs demanded tribute, or a forced payment, from the people they conquered. Tribute was usually in corn, gold, and jade. The question you guys should be able to answer right now, how did the Aztecs build a powerful empire?
All right, moving on to Aztec society and beliefs. You can find this information on 399 and 400 in your book. Be thinking of this question. How was Aztec society organized? Aztec society was divided into 3 highly structured groups or classes. These were nobles, the intermediate class, and commoners. The emperor was at the top of the Aztec society. He belonged to the noble class. The nobles were the smallest but most powerful class. They owned large estates and ran the government and military. Priests also belonged to this class.
The intermediate class was made up of merchants and highly skilled artisans. Most people were commoners. They made up the largest and lowest class. Some commoners were landowning farmers, fishers, craft workers, and soldiers. Landless workers and slaves were below them.
The Aztecs lived in family groups in large communities. Most men farmed their own or a noble's lands. Women cooked, tended children, and did chores.
Religion was a key part of daily life. The Aztecs worshipped about 1,000 agricultural gods.
That's a lot of gods.
That is a lot of gods. It's hard to keep up.
Yep.
Priests in the temple set the times for services and conducted them. The most important ceremonies were held to ask the gods for a good harvest. At these services, humans were sacrificed to the gods. They were usually prisoners of war. War was a religious duty for Aztec warriors. It provided more land and people for the empire and victims for human sacrifice.
Yikes. As the empire grew, so did the need for farmland. Emperors and nobles also wanted more tribute. They wanted more money, right? They wanted more things coming into them.
Yep.
So Aztecs constantly fought and conquered other groups to meet these needs.
In 1502, an emperor named Montezuma II came to power. He demanded more tribute and victims for sacrifice. The harsh treatment by the Aztecs and the demand for more tribute angered many conquered people. Some rebelled. This weakened Aztec power.
In 1519, Spanish troops under Hernan Cortez invaded the Valley of Mexico. They easily captured Montezuma and took control of the empire. The Spanish were victorious mainly because thousands of rebels helped them conquer Tenochtitlan. They also won because they had superior weapons such as muskets, cannon, body armor, and horses. Diseases brought by the Europeans also weakened the Aztecs.
The story goes that when Cortez and his conquistadors landed in Mexico, once they unloaded all the equipment, Cortez actually turned and ordered his troops to burn the ships down so that they would only look forward and not think about their homeland.
And they never went back.
Didn't go back.
All right. What 3 reasons, you guys? You should be able to give 3 reasons why the Spanish were so easily able to defeat the Aztecs.
All right. Our last section is the cultural legacy of the Aztecs. You can find this on pages 401 and 402. The question you guys should be thinking about: what cultural advances did the Aztec make? The Aztecs made advances in the arts, architecture, and astronomy. They built large temples, palaces, and city walls. Aztec achievements in building can still be seen in Mexico City. The Spanish built Mexico City over Tenochtitlan, but the remains of the Aztec Great Temple are there. From other remains, we know that artists made gold beads, pottery, stone urns, feather headdresses, stone sculpture, and jewelry.
I'm not sure if any of you guys have ever been to Mexico City, but if you're there, they actually have openings in the sidewalk in the streets where you can look down and see the ruins of Tenochtitlan, where the current modern day city of Mexico City are built on it. It's actually really kind of a cool thing to be able to see.
That is really cool.
All right, the Aztecs had a spoken language, but wrote using a picture or symbol called a glyph to represent a word or idea. The Aztecs collected their writings in a book of glyphs called a codex. Each codex gives details of Aztec life. Scholars have learned about Aztec life from these codices, or illustrated books.
Guys, remember, glyph and codex were part of your last vocab for your podcast.
Yeah.
So don't forget that. Farming was important to the Aztecs, and they needed to know the best time to plant and harvest. So the Aztecs studied the sun, moon, stars, and planets. They used this information to make 2 calendars. They had a farming calendar for planting and harvesting, and a religious calendar for planning religious ceremonies. All right, guys, the question you should be able to answer right now: what was the Aztecs' cultural legacy?
Okay, one more time, reminding you guys about those vocabulary words that are going to be on a podcast quiz for you. They are Tenochtitlan, Montezuma II, and Hernan Cortez. Be ready to go with that podcast quiz in just a couple of days. I approve this podcast.
I am on empty.